true Horde. We die, bloody and thrashing on the field of battle, like true orcs should. Walk with me into the wounded Vale, where sacred waters remember what I forced into them. In these halls, you will hear the first ripples of corruption rise as Immersius stirs, and you will feel pride take shape, staring back at you in the Shaw's mirror with a voice that sounds too much like my own. You will pass my war machines, steel and fire made into certainty, and you will watch the Horde turn inward as loyal soldiers like Nazgrim stand between duty and doubt. Deeper still, you will tread through my vaults of stolen history, where old power whispers in the dark, and you will hear hunger breathe behind chains as Thok waits in the pens. Then the fortress grows quiet, and the torches line the corridor like witnesses, because at the end of this walk, there is only my throne, my certainty, and the moment I chose to become unbreakable. The wind in the Vale does not rush. It does not scream like the winds that tear through harsh canyons or sweep over winter ridges. Here, it moves like a slow breath, careful and patient, as if the land is trying to soothe itself even while it aches. As you walk, listen to how the world carries sound differently. Your footsteps are small against the wide hush. Water laps gently against stone. Reeds brush each other in a quiet rhythm. Somewhere far off, a bird calls, and the echo is soft enough to feel like it is meant for sleep rather than warning. This place used to be a cradle for serenity. It used to be a living temple, not built by hands, but shaped by time and balance, and the kind of peace that seems impossible until you stand inside it. The light used to glow without trying. It warmed without demanding attention. Even the air felt clean, as if it had never learned how to hold bitterness. Now the Vale is wounded. You can see it in the breaks in the stone, in the way the water looks reluctant to shine, in the faint discoloration that lingers like a bruise under the surface. The colors still exist, but they feel quieter, as if the world has lowered its voice. The mist still drifts, but it drifts around scars. Even the breeze feels cautious, slipping through broken arches and past cracked statues, as if it does not want to disturb what is sleeping beneath. Walk slowly. Let the quiet settle behind your eyes. In war, the mind becomes sharp and narrow, like a blade held too tightly for too long. Here, even as we approach a siege, the land asks you to widen your breath again. There are terraces here that once held gardens so bright they looked unreal, like a dream carved into the earth. The water once ran clear enough to mirror the sky without distortion. The stones once felt warm even in shade, as if they remembered sunlight and held it for later. The Vale's beauty still lingers, but it lingers like a story someone refuses to finish, and every unfinished story has a sadness in it. Sacred places have their own gravity. They pull at those who step into them. Some come to kneel, some come to be forgiven. Some come to make promises they cannot keep. Pandaria was full of people who believed restraint was strength. They believed balance was survival. They believed the world could be soothed if you listened to it long enough. I did not come to listen. I came because I believed the Horde was starving, not for food, not for shelter, but for certainty. We were a people forged in hardship, scattered by defeat, hunted by the consequences of old corruption, and watched by enemies who spoke of peace while keeping their hands on their weapons. I had seen the Alliance look at us as if we were a problem to be managed. I had seen them treat our survival like a temporary inconvenience. I had watched their walls rise higher and their fleets grow larger, and I knew patience would not protect my people if the world decided it was time for us to be pushed back into cages again. Pandaria held power the world had kept hidden. Ancient relics sealed strength, history wrapped in caution. I told myself the Horde deserved that power more than anyone else, because we were the ones who had suffered enough to use it without flinching. In those days, that logic felt clean. It felt like a straight line through a world full of compromises. When I first stood in the Vale, I felt something I rarely admit. I felt awe, not the awe of worship, but the awe of recognizing a force that does not need a blade to command respect. The Vale did not threaten, it did not posture, it simply existed, serene and unyielding in its calm. That kind of strength can humiliate a warrior, because it suggests there are ways to be powerful that do not involve conquest. I remember walking through these waters and seeing my reflection, and for a moment I wondered if the Horde could ever belong in a place like this without breaking it. We are loud by nature, we are scarred by history, we carry survival in our bones. We do not step lightly because we were never taught the world would protect us if we were gentle. In Nagrand, where I grew among the Maghar, the land was harsh in its own way, and it rewarded strength openly. There were no polite illusions there. If you were weak, you suffered. If you were strong, you endured. The sky was wide, the earth was honest, and pride was not a sin. Pride was a spine. Here in Pandaria, the land felt delicate. Not fragile, but delicate, like a blade's edge that must be respected or it will cut you. I did not respect it the way I should have. I respected only the idea that it could be used. When I decided to claim what the Vale guarded, I told myself I was not destroying something sacred. I told myself I was repurposing it. I told myself the world had no right to keep strength locked away while my people lived under threat. That is how a conqueror speaks to himself at night. Keep walking forward. The Vale's beauty thins as you approach the scar that cuts through it. The water grows darker. The stone becomes jagged. The hush becomes strained, like a lullaby sung through clenched teeth. You might pass broken ornaments half submerged in shallow pools, pieces of carvings that once meant harmony. You might see petals drifting on the surface, not bright, but dulled, as if even blossoms have learned sorrow here. The air smells faintly metallic now, mixed with damp stone, and the scent is not unpleasant, but it is a reminder that something unnatural has pressed itself into the land. This is the beginning of the path that leads to my fortress, my final stand, my iron answer to everyone who told me the Horde should be smaller, quieter, humbler. The ground here shows what force looks like when it is pressed into the world. Not elegance, not balance, pressure, impact, control. People will tell you a siege is about battles. They are wrong. A siege is about belief. It is about who is willing to endure, who is willing to spend lives like currency, who is willing to become something ugly in order to win. I became what I believed was necessary, and the Vale, with its wounded calm, became the silent witness to that decision. The breach ahead is not a welcoming gate. It is not carved with blessings or decorated with symbols of peace. It is raw and practical, like a wound made on purpose. Stone split, earth forced aside, a passage opened by will. As you step into its shadow, the air cools. The outside world does not vanish, but it becomes less important. The sound of water and wind fades behind you, replaced by the quiet of enclosed stone. Your footsteps sharpen. Every step is a small announcement. Someone has entered. The first corridors feel like the throat of a fortress, designed to swallow intruders and funnel them into places where defense is easiest. Walls press close, torches burn steady. The light is warm, but not kind. It is the light of a controlled space, meant to reveal movement and erase hiding places. I built Orgrimmar to endure, not only against enemies, but against the softer forces that weaken a people from the inside. Complacency, hesitation, doubt. You may not see Korkron in every shadow, but you will feel them. The architecture itself carries their discipline. Straight lines, reinforced pillars, metal set into stone like a promise that nothing here will bend. The silence is organized, and even the torchlight seems trained to fall in predictable patterns. If you listen carefully, you might imagine faint echoes, boots moving in measured steps, armor shifting with restrained weight, low voices speaking in short commands. Patrols pass beyond corners, doors close somewhere deeper. The fortress is alive with controlled motion, but it does not show you everything at once. That is how a stronghold keeps you uneasy. The Korkron were my fist, my shield, my voice when I was not present. I did not choose them for kindness. I chose them for certainty. A Warchief cannot afford to be surrounded by uncertainty. A Warchief who allows hesitation invites defeat. Many called them oppressors. Many said I turned the Horde into something unrecognizable. They said I replaced honor with obedience. But honor, to me, was never softness. Honor was strength with purpose. Honor was the refusal to bow. Honor was the willingness to do what must be done, even when others trembled at the cost. If someone wants comfort, they should not come to war. Orgrimmar was built from survival. It is not a city made to be pretty. It is a city made to hold its ground. Every wall, every spike, every heavy beam speaks the same language. We will not be moved. To me, Orgrimmar was never just a capital. It was the spine of the Horde. Without a spine, a body collapses. Without Orgrimmar's unbending heart, the Horde would scatter into tribes and arguments and old wounds. I saw unity as strength, and I saw strength as the only language the world respected. This is why the siege matters. Those who came to tear me down did not only want my throne, they wanted to decide what the Horde would become. They wanted to reshape our spine into something softer, something more convenient for our enemies to tolerate. I refused to be tolerated. As you continue, you will hear water again, low and restless, moving through channels built into the fortress like veins. Water should cleanse, water should carry away rot. Here, the water carries something else. It carries the stain of what was disturbed. It carries the whisper of the Shah, the lingering ache of the Vale beyond these walls. The sound is subtle, almost soothing, like a distant stream you can fall asleep to. But beneath that soothing surface there is unease. The water does not sing, it mutters. This is where the siege begins to reveal its deeper truth. Corruption is not simply an enemy outside the gate. Corruption can seep inward. It can nest in the places you thought were yours, and it can rise from the very things you tried to claim. Walk onward. Let the sound of water follow you. Even a fortress built of iron cannot keep every shadow out. Before you reach the chamber, the corridor grows damp. The stone underfoot feels cooler. The air carries a faint mineral scent, mixed with something wrong. Something like stagnant rainwater that has forgotten how to move. Your footsteps echo, then soften, as if the walls absorb sound the closer you get. A fortress often feels dry, hot with torchlight and crowded with the smell of metal. This place feels different. It feels like an old memory of the Vale has been trapped here, trying to remain pure and failing. This is the sound of water turning, the moment when a stream becomes a pool that cannot cleanse itself. The corridor opens into a broad chamber, and the first thing you notice is the pool. It stretches across the floor like a mirror that refuses to show a reflection. The surface ripples faintly, not because of wind, but because something beneath it cannot rest. This place should have been sacred. Even within the siege, you can feel the bones of what it once was. A space meant for purification, a space meant for calm. The stonework suggests reverence, but the water itself looks sick. Immersos gathers here, a water spirit twisted by what was poured into the Vale. Once it might have been gentle. Once it might have drifted through sacred waters and kept them clean, like a guardian that never needed armor. But sacred does not mean untouchable. Sacred does not mean invincible. It only means the world will mourn more loudly when it is damaged. When Immersius rises, it is not only a creature, it is a sensation. It is the feeling of purity trying to remember itself and failing. It is the weight of contamination clinging to something that was never meant to hold it. The Shah are emotions made real. They are not demons from another world. They are what happens when a land, a people, a heart is pressured beyond its balance. In Pandaria, the land itself responds to turmoil. It forms shadows out of feelings. It makes pain into teeth. I told myself I could use that. I told myself that if the enemy has a weapon, the Horde must claim it first. I told myself that restraint was a weakness learned by those who could afford it. And so the Vale became a tool. The Shah became a resource. Even corruption became something I thought could be directed. A commander learns to see everything as fuel. Supplies, terrain, morale, fear. It is a dangerous habit. It makes you efficient. It also makes you blind to the cost of being efficient. I have seen soldiers return from war with something heavy inside them. They smile, they stand straight, they speak of duty, and yet something in their eyes has become distant, like water clouded by silt. They carry memories they cannot rinse away. They carry fear that does not leave when the battle ends. If you press them too long, if you demand too much without giving them space to breathe, that weight begins to leak. It spills into anger, into cruelty, into numbness. Corruption is not always a sudden plunge. Sometimes it is a slow accumulation, one compromise at a time, until the water cannot remain clear. Even if you do not fight here, even if you only walk and observe, the room teaches you something. The water does not settle, the air does not soften. The chamber itself feels tense, like a living thing bracing for impact. Immersus is a reminder that power taken without understanding does not become obedient. It becomes unstable. It leaks. It poisons. It spreads. As you turn away and continue deeper, let the water's sound linger behind you like a thought you cannot dismiss. A siege begins with walls and weapons, but it is always shaped by what the leader refuses to admit. And I refuse to admit many things. The path leads away from the pool and into halls that feel older than my war. The stonework changes. The corridors widen into chambers with carvings and symbols that speak of balance and purity. Lotus motifs appear along cracked panels. Jade inlays, once bright, now look dulled by time and shadow. The air smells faintly of incense and old dust, as if someone lit a shrine long ago and the scent never fully left. This architecture does not brag. It does not threaten. It invites quiet. It expects visitors to lower their voices, even if they arrive in armor. It is almost ironic that these spaces now sit inside the machinery of my siege, like a peaceful song trapped in a prison. Walk slowly. The sound of your footsteps here is softer, as if the stone absorbs them. Even now, even damaged, this place tries to remain calm. Here stand the fallen protectors, guardians who once served the Vale's harmony. Their story is not complicated, and that is what makes it painful. They were meant to protect. They were meant to stand between the world and corruption. They were not conquerors. They were caretakers. Pandaria produced many caretakers. They believed the greatest strength was restraint, the ability to refuse temptation even when power was close enough to touch. Their protectors embodied that. They were living reminders that violence can be controlled, that duty can be quiet. But corruption does not always arrive as a roaring invasion. Sometimes it arrives as a slow seep, a whispered compromise, a grief that goes unspoken until it becomes a shadow with claws. The protectors fell because they were overwhelmed, yes, but also because duty can become a trap. When you are defined by what you defend, you may not notice when your defense becomes the very thing that breaks you. I respected duty. I demanded it. I understood the comfort it gives, the sense that you belong to something larger than your own doubt. But I also used duty. I shaped it into a tool. I told the Horde that obedience was the same as strength. I told them that questions were weakness. I told them that those who hesitated were betraying the future. That kind of thinking builds an army quickly. It also builds fractures, because eventually, duty meets a moment where it asks quietly, what am I serving now? Moving beyond the fallen protectors feels like walking through a pause in the fortress's heartbeat. The air is still. The torchlight seems softer for a few steps. The walls narrow again, then widen, as if the path cannot decide whether it is a tunnel or a temple. This is where doubt tries to speak, not loudly, not in speeches. Doubt speaks in small sensations. The feeling that your grip is too tight, the thought that you have walked past something important and refused to look at it. I did not like doubt. I treated doubt as weakness. In my mind, doubt was the crack that enemies would pry open. Yet I have learned, too late for it to matter, that doubt can also be a warning. It can be the mind's way of saying, you are about to become something you will not recognize. Beyond lies Norushen, a titan construct, an ancient mechanism designed to judge impurity. Norushen does not rage. Norushen does not hate. Norushen measures. There is a coldness in being measured. It does not care about your reasons. It does not care about your history. It does not care about your pain. It cares only about whether you fit the pattern it was built to enforce. I have always distrusted the Titans' idea of order. Their order feels like a cage built for a world that never asked to be caged. They shape reality into rules and then act surprised when life struggles inside them. And yet, judgment reaches under armor. Even when you deny it, the idea that you might be impure can make you tighten your grip. It can make you speak more harshly, not because you are certain, but because you fear the possibility of being wrong. My hands tightened often. Norushen's trial is not only for those who walk these halls in search of treasure. It is for leaders. It is for anyone who says, I did what I had to do, and then refuses to look too closely at what had to truly means. As you move onward, the fortress becomes more practical again. The stone loses its delicate carvings. The air feels heavier, less like a shrine and more like a weapon. You have passed through water, then through judgment, and now you are approaching a place where emotion itself will rise and speak. Pride will not whisper anymore. Pride will step forward and demand to be seen. The next chamber opens like a grand hall designed for proclamation. The ceiling feels higher, the space feels more theatrical. The air itself seems to hold a faint vibration, like a drum struck long ago that never fully stopped humming. This is where the Shah of Pride gathers. Pride is not simply arrogance. Pride can be the refusal to surrender when the world demands you bow. Pride can be the strength that keeps a people alive when despair would otherwise swallow them. Pride can be a torch in darkness. But pride can also become a mask you never remove. It can become the reason you cannot apologize. It can become the reason you cannot hear warnings. It can become the reason you mistake your own hunger for destiny. I lived with pride like a second skin. Before I was Warchief, before I stood in Orgrimmar's heart and spoke of strength, I was a son, living under a name that felt too heavy for a single life to carry. My father's name was Garrosh Hellscream. To many, that name was poison. To others, it was redemption. To me, as a young orc in Nagrand, it was confusion. I grew among the Maghar, uncorrupted and proud, but even there the world's stories reached us. I heard whispers of demon blood and a fall that stained our people. I heard of chains, of shame, of a past that others used to define us. When I learned my father had been one of the first to drink, I felt as though I had inherited the sin through the air itself. I did not want to be the son of the one who damned us. I did not want my strength to be seen as the echo of corruption. So, I became intense. I trained as if training could scrub away history. I held myself to standards that did not allow softness. I told myself that if I became strong enough to be undeniable, then no one could dismiss me as the child of a mistake. That was my first cage. The belief that worth must be proven through force. Then Thrall came. He spoke to me not as a judge, but as someone bearing truth. He told me how my father died. He told me of the final act, how Garrosh broke free and struck down the tyrant who would have chained us forever. In that moment, shame did not vanish. It transformed. It became pride so fierce, it felt like fire in my chest. And with pride came hunger. Hunger to become worthy of that legacy. Hunger to prove that the Hellscream line was not only a story of falling, but a story of rising. Thrall believed in restraint. He believed in balance. He believed that the Horde could live in the world without constantly proving itself through war. I respected him, and in my earlier years I followed him because I saw the strength in his calm. But calm can be mistaken for safety. I watched the Alliance. I watched their leaders speak of peace while never truly trusting us. I watched their armies remain ready. I watched their eyes measure our every move, as if waiting for the moment they could call us monsters again and justify pushing us into corners. In my mind, the world did not change just because you asked it to. The world changed when someone strong enough demanded it. That is where Thrall and I began to split. He wanted the Horde to grow beyond its rage. I wanted the Horde to weaponize its rage before the world could weaponize it against us. The day I stopped believing in restraint was not one dramatic moment. It was a series of small disappointments, a series of warnings ignored. A series of compromises that seemed to cost us more than they gave. I did not want to compromise our survival, so I tightened my grip and called it leadership. The Shah of Pride rises like a living accusation. It does not need to shout because it already knows you can hear it. It is made from the same substance that lives quietly in every heart that has ever whispered, I cannot be wrong. I believed the Horde needed me. I believed the Horde needed an iron hand. I believed softness was a doorway the Alliance would eventually march through. I had watched diplomacy fail. I had watched compromise lead to more demands. I had watched the Alliance posture as if peace was generosity they could grant when it pleased them. So I chose certainty. I chose conquest. I chose to make the Horde feared. The Shah makes those choices echo louder than they did in my own mind. It asks questions without words. Were you protecting your people or protecting your pride? Were you building a future or building a monument to yourself? Were you strong or simply unwilling to change? The worst part of pride is that it can make you feel calm even when you are wrong. It can make you feel righteous while you are cutting away your own future. It can make you mistake applause for truth. I did not hear the Shah as an enemy. I heard it as a reflection that refused to lie. As you leave this chamber, notice how the air shifts. It does not become lighter. It becomes sharper, more mechanical, as if emotion has given way to iron and oil. But pride does not stay behind. Pride travels with you. It follows like a quiet companion, whispering that you were right to demand more, that you were right to strike first, that you were right to refuse restraint. There are people who believe pride is always a flaw. I do not agree. Pride is what kept the Horde alive when the world wanted us gone. But pride unbalanced becomes poison, and I drank it slowly, telling myself it was medicine. Ahead, the siege becomes war in its most visible form. Engines, fortifications, towers, and the steady sound of industry. This is where my instincts felt most at home. The path opens into a yard where the fortress reveals its teeth. Here, war is not a concept. It is equipment, ramps and platforms, chains and beams, the smell of oil and smoke, the sense that the ground itself has been converted into a weapon. Your footsteps echo in open space now. The air feels alive with imagined movement. Soldiers calling out, metal clinking, ropes creaking under strain. Above, towers loom like watchful silhouettes. Even if the battlefield is quiet in this walk, you can feel the memory of noise embedded in the stone. This is where a leader's choices become physical. You can see what I valued, strength made visible, control made practical, fear made reliable. Galacrus is a creature of the skies, a symbol of dominance. In war, controlling the sky means controlling the battlefield's breath. It means you decide where danger falls. It means enemies cannot hide behind walls and call themselves safe. To force a beast like Galacrus into service is to declare that nothing remains untouched by your will. It is conquest not only of cities, but of nature itself. Some would call that arrogance. I called it preparedness. If the Alliance could bring fleets and cannons, then the Horde would bring terror from above. If the world wanted to cage us again, then the world would learn what it means to see the Horde coming before the ground even shakes. There is also something else here, quieter. The truth that when you turn living things into tools, you begin to see everything as something to be used. That way of thinking spreads. It moves from beasts to soldiers, from soldiers to allies, from allies to the very earth. It becomes a habit. It becomes a worldview. It becomes a cage you do not notice because you built it yourself. The Iron Juggernaut is my war made into a machine. Relentless, heavy, unstoppable. It does not negotiate. It does not hesitate. It does not ask if its path is righteous. It moves forward. There is comfort in that kind of momentum. In a life filled with betrayal and shifting loyalties, a machine offers something almost soothing. Predictability. It will do what it was built to do. It does not question. It does not doubt. It does not wake up one day and decide it is tired of the cause. I wanted the Horde to be like that. I wanted my people to stop being the ones who adapt to the world's cruelty and start being the ones who define it. But machines have a weakness. They do not know when to stop. They do not know when the path forward leads into a cliff. In the glow of industry, it is easy to believe you are shaping the future. It is easy to believe that metal and fire can solve problems that hearts and minds complicate. It is easy to believe that if you build enough weapons, you will never be hurt again. That belief is seductive. As you walk past the Juggernaut's presence, let its imagined rumble become distant, like thunder moving away. There is peace in steady sound, until you realize the steady sound belongs to something enormous enough to crush whatever it touches. Leaving the yard feels like stepping away from open violence and into something tighter. The path begins to narrow again. The air cools. The walls press closer. War against an enemy is simple compared to war inside your own people. Outside, you know who you face. Inside, every blade carries memory. Every argument carries history. Every victory costs something that cannot easily be repaired. And deeper ahead, the Horde's fractures begin to show. Leaving the open yard feels like leaving a battlefield's horizon and stepping into the throat of a decision. The air cools again. The echoes tighten. Outside, war can be loud enough to hide your doubts. Inside, when corridors press close and the torchlight becomes steady, there is nowhere for doubt to go except into you. I used to believe that if I built enough machines, if I stacked enough iron and fire between the Horde and its enemies, then the future would be simple. Machines are simple. They do not argue. They do not remember grudges. They do not carry old wounds like banners. They simply move forward until they are stopped. But a people are not a machine. A people have voices. A people have memories. A people have different definitions of honor, and those definitions do not always fit neatly into command. As you walk deeper, listen to the difference in silence. In the yard, silence feels like a pause between battles. Here, silence feels like listening, like waiting, like the fortress itself is holding still to hear which way the Horde's heart will turn. I demanded unity. I demanded obedience. I told myself it was the same thing. It is not. Unity is a rope woven from trust, and trust cannot be forged at sword point. Obedience can. Obedience can be forced quickly, like a door slammed shut. But when you force obedience, you also force everything else inside with it. Resentment, fear, and the slow hunger to break free. The Korkron understood discipline. They understood how to make footsteps match, how to make a hallway feel owned. But even the most disciplined soldier has a private mind, and private minds do not always obey. The deeper you go, the more the fortress feels like it is turning inward, like a fist closing. And with every step, remember this: the strongest walls do not only keep enemies out, sometimes they keep truths in. The path narrows, leading you away from open yards and into corridors that feel intimate, like the private veins of a fortress. The air becomes warmer, the torchlight becomes steadier, the smell shifts from oil to incense and stone dust. This is where the siege becomes personal, because this is where the conflict is no longer just Horde versus Alliance. It is Horde versus itself. A people can survive external enemies for generations. Internal fractures can break them in a season. Shamanism, at its heart, is relationship. It is listening to earth, fire, water, and air, and recognizing that power comes with respect. Thrall embodied that. He spoke with spirits as allies, not as slaves. I allowed another path. The Korkron Dark Shaman did not ask for the element's consent. They demanded it, they bound it, they twisted the earth into chains and used nature like a weapon that could be forced into obedience. Why did I permit that? Because it was effective, because it was fast, because in war, speed often feels like righteousness. I told myself that if the world would not grant the Horde respect freely, then the Horde would take respect by making the very ground tremble. But there is a cost when you treat the world as something to dominate. The spirits grow silent. The air loses its song. The earth becomes tense beneath your feet, as if it is waiting for the moment it can shake you off. That silence is not peace. It is resistance gathering itself. There is a particular kind of fear that comes when your own people begin to question you, not because they are weak, but because they care. That fear is sharper than the fear of enemies, because it threatens your identity. It threatens the story you tell yourself about why you deserve to lead. I demanded loyalty. And when loyalty wavered, I treated it like betrayal. I made the mistake of believing that agreement was the same as unity. Agreement can be forced. Unity cannot. This is the kind of mistake that happens when pride hardens into policy. Nazgrim stands deeper within, surrounded by the atmosphere of command, banners, weapons, a sense of organized strength. He is not a monster. He is not a madman. He is a soldier who believed in the Horde and believed in me. Nazgrim's story is one of the saddest kinds of loyalty. Loyalty offered with sincerity and spent by a leader who could not afford to waste sincerity but did anyway. He fought in Northrend. He bled for the Horde. He carried scars earned honestly. He understood what it means to stand in cold winds with death on every side and still refuse to break. When I became Warchief, he saw in me a leader who would not compromise our survival. And I did not compromise, not in the ways that mattered to him. Nazgrim did not crave cruelty. He craved strength. He wanted the Horde to be respected. He wanted us to never again be herded into cages and called savages by those who fear what they cannot control. But loyalty is complicated. It can tie good men to bad roads. When heroes face Nazgrim, they face not only his blade, but the grief of what happens when honorable soldiers are used to defend a future that is rotting. They face the tragedy of a soldier who believes he is protecting the Horde, even as the Horde's heart is splitting. There is a part of me that still respects him deeply. There is a part of me that wishes I had listened when men like him carried their concerns quietly. Because men like Nazgrim do not protest for pride. They protest because they can feel the ground shifting under the Horde's feet. Past Nazgrim, the fortress feels like it turns inward and downward. The air grows cooler, the light grows dimmer, the corridors become quieter, and the silence feels deliberate. This is the descent into my inner wall, where I kept my strongest shields, my greatest trophies, and my darkest decisions. Walk slowly. Let the quiet cradle you. The deeper you go, the easier it is to believe there is no outside world. The fortress becomes a universe, and I, at the center, become the only star that matters. That is how power seduces. Malkorok was my personal protector, my wall made into flesh and armor. He did not doubt, he did not hesitate, he did not soften when others begged for mercy. There is a kind of leader who surrounds himself with mirrors, advisors who reflect his opinions back to him until he believes them more strongly. I did not choose mirrors, I chose shields. But a shield that never questions becomes a fist. A protector who cannot imagine mercy becomes a weapon pointed not only at enemies, but at dissent. Malkorok represents the part of my rule that became absolute. The part that said, I decide what is necessary, and then stopped listening when the world tried to answer back. As you pass his space, notice the tension in your shoulders. Even in imagination, even in calm walking, the presence of unwavering judgment tightens the body. Leaving it behind can feel like stepping out from under a heavy roof. Beyond Malkorok's guard lie the vaults, spaces that smell of old wood, metal, dust, and sealed history. Here are the spoils of Pandaria, treasures and relics gathered and stacked like trophies. Walk slowly through these halls. Imagine crates marked with symbols you cannot read. Imagine artifacts wrapped in cloth, sealed in boxes, chained shut not because they are valuable, but because they are dangerous. Some crates feel as though they contain more than objects. They feel as though they contain chapters, pieces of Pandaria's memory boxed up and stored away, as if history can be owned. People think treasure is just gold. Pandaria's treasure is memory. It is ancient power kept quiet because those who lived here understood something. Power untamed is not a gift, it is a storm. I collected these spoils because I believed the Horde could not survive on principle alone. I believed that if we were to stand against the world's cruelty, we needed more than courage. We needed tools. But collecting tools can become collecting identity. You begin to define yourself by what you own, by what you have taken, by what you can control. A conqueror's hunger never ends. It only shifts shape. Among these relics, there is a presence colder than stone. It is not loud. It is not immediate. It is subtle, like a wrong note in a song that otherwise seems beautiful. It makes the air feel slightly heavier. It makes torchlight seem a little less warm. It makes you aware of the space behind your back, as if something unseen is listening. This is where the story touches something older than my ambition. The lingering influence of the old gods. The shadow of power that does not care about honor, does not care about the Horde, does not care about anything except consumption and corruption. I told myself I could wield that darkness without being changed by it. I told myself I was stronger than temptation. Every leader tells himself that. It is easy to believe you are in control when you are the one holding the weapon. It is harder to notice when the weapon has begun shaping your head. Then the air changes. It becomes more animal, more raw. The corridors feel less like a vault and more like a cage. You hear the faint rattle of chains, not constant, but occasional. Like a reminder that something enormous exists just beyond the next turn. You hear a slow breath that seems too heavy for the space, and the sound makes the stone feel smaller. Thok is hunger made into a beast. He is a reminder that beneath civilization and banners and speeches, the world still contains ancient teeth. Some creatures do not care about politics. They care about the next meal. I kept Thok because fear is useful. Fear keeps soldiers obedient. Fear keeps enemies hesitant. Fear makes people look at your rule and think twice before challenging it. But fear is never loyal. Fear is a storm you think you can direct until it decides to move on its own. As you pass this place, let the imagined roars fade into distance like thunder retreating over hills. Let the fear become simply an echo, because we are not here to be startled. We are here to drift through the shape of a story. And the story now approaches its final layers. Machinery, ancient allies, and the chamber where my certainty waited like a blade. The final descent takes you into the belly of industry. Pipes run along walls, heat lingers in the air, platforms hang over depths that glow faintly, as if the fortress has a furnace for a heart. The sound here is not water and wind. It is the imagined hum of machinery and the faint crackle of heat. Here is siege crafter Blackfuse, goblin engineer, architect of destruction, a mind that turns warfare into design. Blackfuse did not serve me out of loyalty. He served me because I offered resources and a purpose that fit his hunger for invention. Goblins understand something many leaders refuse to admit. Progress does not ask whether it is good. It asks whether it is possible. If it is possible, someone will build it. And if someone will build it, a leader either controls it or becomes a victim of it. Blackfuse looked at war the way a craftsman looks at raw materials. He saw walls and thought of how to break them more efficiently. He saw bodies and thought of how to move them like pieces on a board. He did not hate. He did not love. He calculated. There is something chilling about a mind that can turn suffering into a blueprint and still sleep at night. Walking through this workshop, you can feel the difference between strength and obsession. Strength defends what matters. Obsession consumes what matters in order to feed itself. I told myself I was building a horde that would never be pushed into chains again. I told myself every weapon, every engine, every harsh decision was justified because the result would be safety. But safety built on endless war is not safety. It is hunger disguised as a fortress. The more power you gather, the more you fear losing it. The more you fear losing it, the more you tighten your grip. The tighter you grip, the more you crush what you claim to protect. I did not see that clearly then. Or perhaps I saw it and refused to speak it aloud, because speaking it would have meant admitting that my certainty had begun to rot from the inside. Beyond the workshop, the air becomes strange. It feels older, quieter, as if you have stepped into a history that never cared about orcs, never cared about the Horde or Alliance, never cared about any banner at all. The Paragons of the Klaxxi are not my soldiers. They are ancient warriors bound by oath, devoted to a purpose older than my entire world. They carry the weight of an empire that rose and fell long before the modern races began their wars. They sided with me not because they loved me, but because they recognized something in me. The willingness to do whatever is necessary to shape the future. They understood devotion that becomes dangerous. They understood loyalty that does not bend, even when bending might save lives. In them, I saw kinship, not comfort, kinship. Because I too had begun to treat my vision as sacred. Now the fortress grows still. The noise of machinery fades behind you. The corridors become cleaner, colder, more deliberate. The torches burn steady. The air feels like it has been waiting. This part of the walk is where footsteps sound loud, because silence has been arranged on purpose. The fortress wants you to feel the approach. It wants you to understand you are nearing the center. And I am waiting. Not as a caricature drawn by enemies, not as a simple villain, but as the Warchief I believed the Horde required. A leader who refused to kneel, even when kneeling might have spared pain. A leader who believed peace offered by the Alliance was merely a pause between chains. The closer you get, the more the corridor feels like a narrowing thought, a single idea tightening in the mind. This is the end of the path, and everything behind it has been leading here. Before you reach my door, there is a space where the fortress seems to hesitate. The corridor widens slightly, as if giving you room to breathe, and the torchlight becomes more even, less flickering, like a calm hand smoothing a sheet. The air here is still, not dead, not empty, just still, as if the stone itself is listening for the next footstep. This is where leaders speak to themselves, even if they pretend they do not. I have stood in rooms like this before. Outside war councils, outside duels, outside moments that history remembers. In those rooms, the body stays strong, but the mind becomes quiet enough to hear what it has been avoiding. Not guilt, always. Sometimes it is simply clarity. Sometimes it is the realization that your story has been moving in a straight line for so long that turning feels impossible.
It is not too late in Garrosh. Lay down the mantle, Warchief. We can end this here, now. More bloodshed.
Ha! Do you remember nothing of honor, of glory on a battlefield? You would parley with the humans, who allowed warlocks to practice their dark magics right under our feet. You are weak. We are the Orcish Horde, the true Horde. We die, bloody and thrashing on the field of battle, like true orcs should. You are an orc no longer, and speak for none but yourself. You betrayed our people to forge your fragile alliances, and I will take great pleasure in tearing them apart.
Then you have forced my hand. I will correct the mistake I made long ago. Spirits of the wind, the earth, the water, hear my call! Come to my aid!
Fool! My dark shaman have twisted and tortured the elements for miles around. They cannot hear you now. Once again, you prove too weak and powerless to do anything.
Never powerless, Garrosh. And never alone.
So, you wish to face off against a real orc warchief. So be it.
I told myself I was protecting the Horde. I told myself I was forging an empire that could not be ignored. I told myself that those who opposed me were naive, that they did not understand how quickly the world would tighten a chain if given the chance. And there is truth in that fear. The world has chained us before. The world has smiled while doing it. But fear is a poor architect when it becomes your only architect. Fear builds fortresses that never open their gates. Fear builds laws that treat every question like treason. Fear builds a throne that feels less like a seat and more like a cage you cannot leave without admitting you were wrong to enter it. Listen to the quiet here. It is not only the quiet of stone. It is the quiet of the moment before an answer, the moment before a fall, the moment before a choice becomes permanent. Now step forward again. The corridor narrows. The torches line up like witnesses. And the story you walked into from the wounded Vale reaches the center it was always moving toward.
Yes, I can see it now. I can see the future of this world. A world ruled by the Horde. My Horde. See the visions of fear, despair, and doubt as I have.
If you want to understand why I became what I became, do not start at the end. Start in Nagrand among the Maghar, where orcs lived uncorrupted, where survival was earned honestly, where the sky was wide and the earth was blunt. I grew up hearing stories about my father. At first I heard the shame, the demon blood, the corruption, the fall. I felt that shame like a weight on my chest. I believed I carried the stain in my name. Then Thrall came and told me the truth of my father's end, how he broke free, how he struck down a tyrant, how he died as the orc he should have been. That knowledge was like lightning. It burned away my shame and replaced it with fierce pride. And with pride came hunger, hunger to prove I was worthy of that legacy, hunger to become a Hellscream that the Horde could look at without flinching. I did not want to be remembered as the son of a failure.
The true Horde will come to pass. I have seen it. It has shown me. I have seen mountains of skulls and rivers of blood, and I will have my world!
I wanted to be remembered as the one who turned the Horde into something the world could not dismiss. When I fought in Northrend, when I watched death rise in armies and saw what true tyranny looks like, I learned that hesitation kills. I learned that compromise can become a slow death if your enemy is patient enough. When I became Warchief, I believed the future demanded hardness.
Behold my glorious destiny!
I believed that if I allowed weakness, if I allowed too much mercy, the Alliance would smell it and press in until we were trapped again.
This world is my destiny. My destiny.
I did not want my people trapped, so I demanded obedience. I tightened Orgrimmar around my will like armor. I told myself it was unity. I told myself it was strength. And in doing so, I made the Horde smaller in spirit, even as I tried to make it larger in power. That is the tragedy of obsession. It often defeats its own purpose while insisting it is victorious. When the final confrontation comes, stories expect thunder, they expect roaring, they expect rage. But let me speak softly instead, because softness can carry truth farther than anger. I did not believe I was evil. I believed I was necessary. I believed the Horde needed a leader who could make the world afraid to threaten us again. I believed fear would protect us better than diplomacy ever did. And fear did protect us, for a time. But fear also turned the Horde against itself. It turned comrades into suspects. It turned loyalty into compliance. It turned honor into something spoken about rather than lived. I can admit, in this quiet telling, that my pride became a cage. I can admit that my certainty stopped being strength and started being stubbornness. I can admit that I stopped listening long before the siege reached my door. A siege ends, but it does not vanish. It leaves echoes, it leaves scars, it leaves questions that linger in halls long after footsteps have passed. After Orgrimmar, the Horde had to look at itself and decide what it wanted to be. A weapon, a home, a people shaped by fear, or a people shaped by resilience that does not need cruelty to prove itself. My story became a lesson told in arguments and histories. Some call me tyrant, some call me warning, some call me the leader who nearly forged an unstoppable horde and then let obsession consume the forge. Let them speak. You have walked the path. You have felt the shift from wounded Vale to iron fortress, from watery corruption to mechanical certainty, from loyalty to fracture, from pride to reckoning. Now let the torches blur into warm points of light. Let the corridors soften in your mind. Let the siege become a distant memory, like a storm you watched from far away. The world continues, the Horde continues, and the echo of my choices, like slow thunder, continues too.